Yes. So good evening. Today we will have discussion of AS-8. So in AS-7 last week we covered some parts of Indian anthropology in paper 2. So both AS-7 and AS-8 deal with paper 2. Last week we covered some parts of paper 2 in AS-7, and in this test we'll cover the pending portions of paper 2, especially first section, Indian society, in this test. In this test, the main focus is on some topics of caste and Indian village or village studies. And I also posted 2 handouts on the test series group which have content for some topics where I found students to be inadequate. So I posted some content on the group. Now the first question, please refer to handouts because I'll keep using these handouts to discuss these topics. 1 minute, emergency. Yes. Please refer to the handouts. Open handout 3, caste 3. In caste 3, if you refer to page 3 onwards, page 3 second half onwards, you have content on modernization of Indian tradition. So before we get into content, what is the key takeaway that we had in last class? The key takeaway that we had in the last session was that in paper 2 we have to be conscious about developing frameworks. We need to be careful about framework. For any topic, develop a framework and then try to develop explanation. Your answers need to also have a explanatory style to it. Answers cannot be purely static, but answers need to have a explanatory style to them. So whatever topic we choose, you must make sure you have a framework, offer explanation with contemporary examples and some current affairs. They are very important. Contemporary examples, they are very important to justify our position in this paper. So make sure we cover all these things. So the first question is modernization of Indian tradition. Modernization of Indian tradition. The problem is the question asked for modernization of Indian tradition concept. It is not a general question on modernization. Most students wrote a very general discussion on modernization, what it means and what are the features of modernism and all that. So please understand that the question is not asking us only about modernization, but it's about a specific concept called modernization of Indian tradition given by Yogendra Singh. So you can briefly introduce what is modernization and modernism, but then you have to go towards the specific concept given by Yogendra Singh. What does Yogendra Singh say? Yogendra Singh says in India, modernity entered, but when modernity entered India, it did not displace tradition, but we have some kind of two-way interaction between modernity and tradition. In fact, he calls this as, if you look at the handout, dialectical relationship. Yes, he says there is a dialectical relationship between modernity and tradition. So it is not like modernity entered and tradition exited. No, it is like there is modernity and there is tradition. And both these things began to interact with each other. Both these things began to interact with each other. So modernity was influencing tradition, and tradition was also influencing modernity. It is not like modernity came and replaced tradition and tradition was kicked out and it exited. That is not what happened. So he's essentially telling us that, and he gives various examples, like take caste. Caste is a tradition, and media, social media or internet, social media or internet, they are all aspects of modernity. Now, caste, when caste is there in society, it is a traditional aspect of society. Just because modernity has entered India, did it mean caste was wiped out? No. Instead, we are using media, internet to perpetuate caste. We have online caste communities, we also have websites for caste, we also have associations for online caste-based matrimonies and so on. So what are we using? What is happening here? We are using technology to strengthen and perpetuate caste. Similarly, take religion. Hindu religion, for example. We have religion has, any religion tends to have a lot of superstitions, blind faith and various practices that are not very modern. So when we have technology like media, internet, are we using technology to reform religion and make it completely modern? No. Instead, what is happening is technology is being used to strengthen religion. So today we have concepts like e-darshan, or they send the prasadam or turmeric and kunkuma, all these things are sent to you through courier. You can book some ritual through online portal. You can book darshan through an online portal. So what is happening? The traditional belief or traditional religious system is not replaced. Instead, we are using technology to strengthen tradition. That is, we are using modernity not to reform tradition, but we are using modernity to strengthen tradition. That is what he means, Yogendra Singh means by modernization of Indian tradition. And then if you look at page 4 of the handout, there we have a diagram. The diagram is very important. So Yogendra Singh, he breaks this into two levels. He says we can first look at these changes in terms of orthogenetic changes, and we can also look at them in terms of heterogenetic changes. This is one way to look, or we can also look at it in terms of structural changes and cultural changes. Structural changes and cultural changes. Structural changes are again broken down into micro structural changes and macro structural changes. So we have to discuss the scheme of Yogendra Singh and discuss the whole thing with examples. That's all. Next is linguistic minorities. This was a question that was asked in the mains of last year, so I repeated this. It's a very easy question. Just take definition of linguistic minorities and data of how many languages and groups are in India, and then discuss the constitutional safeguards. So first discuss the problems faced by them. That is, their culture is under threat, they have educational issues, they are not politically represented, economically they have difficulty in getting jobs, culturally they are insignificant, and social problems. So discuss the various problems that they face, and then discuss the constitutional provisions, especially highlight Article 29, Article 30, Article 350A. So discuss all these things to explain the different constitutional provisions that we have for linguistic minorities, and discuss the way forward or suggest some, and here talk about special officer for linguistic minorities mentioned in the constitution, and discuss way forward. How do we protect linguistic minorities? And here you can even add from current affairs, NEP, National Education Policy 2020. Here there is a clause for having 3 language formula. So you can discuss all of that as part of the discussion on linguistic minorities. Next, third, sacred complex. This is again a very easy and straightforward question. So most of you wrote the question well, but then you did not complete the question. That's why I said have a framework. When you have a framework, you will know what are the different dimensions you are covering. What students are doing is, in question, you are taking two dimensions, dimension 1, dimension 2, and you are writing many points under two dimensions and assuming that the answer is complete. No. Instead, you should identify at least 4 dimensions. Even if you write fewer points under each dimension, that will be better. This is better than this. So this kind of framework where you are touching 3 dimensions is better than this kind of framework where you have just 2 dimensions. Let's say you have 10 points under each. Both have 10 points each. This will fetch more marks than this because here 10 points are distributed across 4 dimensions. Here 10 points are distributed across just 2 dimensions. So it is not just about number of points, but it's also about number of dimensions you are touching. In this question, what happened was I saw many students just wrote what is sacred complex. You did not discuss its significance. You did not link it with great traditions, little traditions, and you did not discuss its criticism. And some other concept, you didn't discuss the concepts that came after it. That's why the answer looked narrow. So very simple framework. What is it? First, define it. Sacred complex is proposed by L.P. Vidyarthi to study the structure of traditions and the way in which different traditions interact in Indian society. So first define sacred complex and then discuss its components. Discuss the components of sacred complex. What are the different components of sacred complex? So you have sacred specialists. First you have sacred geography. Explain each of this. Sacred geography, sacred specialists, sacred performances. We have these 3 things. Discuss each of this and discuss this in the context of the example of Gaya. That is, in the L.P. Vidyarthi studied the sacred complex in the temple town of Gaya. So explain that. With that you explain these 3 things and different sections of these 3. Sacred geography, there is a diagram of Kshetra and all that, draw that, and then specialists here talk about the various classes of priests who coexist in Gaya. Here you discuss the different types of performances that we see in the sacred complex of Gaya. All of that we can discuss under components. And then discuss the significance. Significance of Gaya. What is the significance? Significance here, you should talk about things like how, and draw a diagram here. So what is the diagram? You can draw a diagram like this. Great tradition, little tradition, and sacred complexes exist within great tradition. So discuss the significance. What is significance? Significance is sacred complexes help maintain cultural continuity between the different traditions in India at a time when we did not have modern means of transport and communication. So when we didn't have any modern means of transport communication, how did we have great tradition, little tradition, and how did we have processes like parochialization, and how did processes like universalization take place? These kind of processes, they happened through the system of sacred complex. So just discuss that, and with that you can describe significance and then talk about criticism. Criticism, one of the major criticism is that It is just theoretical, it is only a theoretical concept, but not a analytical concept. It is not an analytical concept, but it is only a theoretical concept. And hence Marriott and Cohn, they proposed an analytical concept called as networks and centers to understand this process of how different nodes, different sacred complexes exist to help the different traditions exist and interact. And another criticism is that sacred complexes need not be only a Hindu or a Brahmanical complex. Even a church or the famous masjid, like the masjid we have in Mecca, all of these could serve as sacred complexes and thus help in the spread and diffusion of cultural elements. That is sacred complex. Then we have Panchayat Raj. Impact of Panchayat Raj on Indian society. Even here, even in this question, the one problem I noticed was students were mostly writing constitutional provisions for Panchayat Raj and all of that. No, it is not about constitutional provisions about Panchayat Raj. The question is about Panchayat Raj and its impact on rural, or how did it change the landscape of villages in India. So briefly write about Panchayat Raj, talk about 73rd. So brief introduction where you talk about 73rd, 74th Amendment, and also talk about the different important articles and how they all created a three-tier Panchayat system. Discuss about all of that and then discuss the positive impact. Here you can talk about impact on caste, impact on gender, how women empowerment happened, empowerment of rural. I can talk about decentralization. It is creating participatory governance. And you can also mention things like how it helped in taking up rural development agenda forward. So all these points can be discussed under positive impact and discuss some examples like 1/3 reservation for women and all those examples you can discuss, and then discuss the challenges or negatives. One negative impact is it is leading to factionalism and groupism in villages. It is leading to factionalism and groupism within villages. And other issue is things like Panchayat Raj is lack of empowerment through funds, finances, functions. So there is a issue in terms of lack of empowerment, and because of that also they are not able to function well. And then finally discuss suggestions or way forward. That's it. That's why dimensions are very, very important. Make sure you cover different dimensions and not just a few key points. Then next we have tribe caste continuum. Even this first define what it is. Here define and background. What is the background of this? Background is that initially scholars felt that in India tribes eventually become castes, but then F.G. Bailey, here you should mention F.G. Bailey as well as Surajit Sinha. Mention F.G. Bailey, mention Surajit Sinha, and say both of them studied this process and both of them felt that in India, caste and tribe are not two distinct entities. They believed that caste and tribe are not this is tribe, this is caste. So they believed that caste and tribe are not two distinct entities, two distinct entities, but they exist as a continuum. Different elements, different societies can fall at different points or different levels on this continuum, and we have to study where a particular society would fall. And then they gave features, discuss what is the feature of tribe, what is the feature of caste. So they gave tribe as segmentary group, caste is organic group. This is characterized by egalitarianism, this is by hierarchy. This is part of little traditions, this is part of great traditions, and so on. So this is characterized by dependence, this is characterized by dependence, this is by specialization, and so on. So describe what are the features of tribe and features of caste. That's it. And then whenever impact or changes that happen to culture, whenever a tribe slowly changes to caste. And finally, criticism. Many criticize that F.G. Bailey wrongly suggested or described this concept. They pointed out that N.K. Bose especially criticized that no, tribes are not very different societies. He called tribes as backward Hindus. And they criticized that F.G. Bailey and others are imposing Western ideas on Indian society. He criticized that F.G. Bailey is imposing Western ideas on Indian society. So they said tribe and caste are being studied in a wrong way by this concept. That's all. That is tribe and caste continuum. And of course, you can add that this concept also has been inspired by Robert Redfield's folk-urban continuum. It was influenced by folk-urban continuum of Robert Redfield. That's it. Then we have concept of westernization. So the question is about westernization. I don't know why some students wrote about Sanskritization at great length. So when I was evaluating, I found that some students wrote for this question, they wrote lengthy discussion on Sanskritization, what it is, what are its details, and so on. Question on Sanskritization was already asked in previous test. In AST 7, we already had a question on Sanskritization. This is not about Sanskritization, but the question's demand is westernization. Now, if you look at the handout, Caste 3, page 1. On Caste 3, page 1, I posted this handout on the course group also, Telegram group of the course. If you see there, on the first page, we have extensive content on westernization. So we can just use this content and reproduce it very well to have good answers for this, have good content for this question. So how do you look at this concept? First, define. How do you define it? You define it as various changes that India went through in society and culture due to 150 years of British rule. So this refers to various changes that India went through in terms of technology, ideas, institutions, and values under the impact of 150 years of British rule. Then discuss there are three levels or three types of westernization. So you can just discuss them, and here we have, for example, primary, secondary, tertiary. So we have these three different kinds of westernization: primary westernization, secondary westernization, and also tertiary westernization. Then you can discuss the impact. Discuss the impact of westernization. Here, for example, in the handout, we discussed 9 impacts. So, discuss impact in ritually. First, you can have discussion of their impact on ritual sphere, how rituals changed. We gave up ritualism and we moved in terms of more rational ideas and we became less superstitious. Then we also have changes in belief system, how the various beliefs that we should marry within the same caste, we should marry in the same religion, we should marry at a particular age, all of those belief systems were given up. Then we took up many social reforms, like for example all the socio-religious reforms we discuss in study in modern India, all of that can be discussed here. Then under westernization, things changes in education, changes in economy, like communication system, changes in political sphere. Here you can talk about rise of nationalism and values like equality and liberty. And then we also have things like Western art and architecture. So you can discuss all these impacts here. And after impact, finally, you can talk about criticism of this concept. So many said, first, westernization is a value-loaded concept. So we can talk about criticism of the concept. But in this question, since there is no time, there is no space, you can skip criticism because there is a second part to the question. You can skip criticism, but in general, you should also know the criticisms for westernization concept. Criticism could be things like it is not just, India did not just change from British influence, India also changed from Russian or Japanese influence, or westernization is a value-loaded concept. It is trying to, it also involves judgment. It is also racist in its thinking. So discuss all those criticisms, and hence because of all these issues today, we point out to alternate concepts like modernization to describe the social change than just calling it as westernization. So discuss that. And the second part of the question is examine the relationship between westernization and Sanskritization. Most students do not write this. Very few could write the second part. So here again, on page 2 of the handout, I gave 4 points, westernization versus Sanskritization. So you can structure this discussion in terms of westernization as a prelude to Sanskritization. Means, for example, as lower castes are Sanskritizing, upper castes are increasingly westernizing so as to separate themselves from the lower caste people. That is called as westernization as a prelude to Sanskritization. Sometimes you can also see westernization as a promoter, is acting as a promoter of Sanskritization. How does westernization promote Sanskritization? For example, let's say some people who are Sanskritizing, they want to form an association to take up this activity. So they form an association, they use railway networks to travel, meet, organize caste meetings, and they publish some journals or some magazines using printing technology to spread the ideas of Sanskritization and social mobility. Then they are using all the benefits of westernization like technology only to make sure they have Sanskritization activity. Third is westernization as opposing factor to Sanskritization. It is a opposing factor to Sanskritization. So here what do? Here you can discuss how some lower castes increasingly are realizing that why should we Sanskritize? They are seeing Sanskritic culture as some kind as inferior to Western culture. So some are thinking that we can directly westernize. So eating habits of wherever, like eating non-veg, alcoholism, these are things where Westernism, Western culture and Sanskritic culture come in conflict. Even secular education, Sanskritization talks about Vedic education, whereas westernization is more in favor of secular and open education. So in some areas there is also conflict. Discuss these 3 dimensions to the second half of the question. Next, critically examine the contributions of American anthropologists to the study of Indian traditions. So question clearly says 2 things. Even here students' answers were not up to the mark. And one of the reasons for why it was not up to the mark is not because you do not know content, it is because most of you had problem in interpretation of the question. So this is a very important thing, please. You should know how to interpret the question rightly. You can't interpret the question because in subjective exams like this, in objective exam, even if you interpret a question wrong, it's just 1 mark, 1 question out of 100. Here we have 20 questions, only limited questions, and if you interpret 1 question wrong, even though you know content, you might end up writing irrelevant things for the question. So in the case of this question, many students interpreted this wrongly. So what are the keywords in this question? It is American anthropologists and Indian traditions. It is asking how American anthropologists played a crucial role for the study of Indian traditions. And most of you missed the Indian tradition and you wrote all the different people, Morris Opler, Oscar Lewis, F.G. Bailey, and so on and so forth. So no, when we talk about American anthropologists' influence, we are especially referring to the influence of Chicago School. So here, the Chicago School was founded by Robert Redfield, and he took up what we called as civilizational studies. Robert Redfield took up many civilizational studies. So we have to highlight what these civilizational studies are and what is Chicago School. And then in India, under the influence of Robert Redfield, McKim Marriott, Milton Singer, L.B. Vidyarthi. So McKim Marriott, Milton Singer, L.B. Vidyarthi. These people took up the civilizational studies of Robert Redfield further and applied this to India. And what are the important concepts they developed? So when I said to the study of Indian traditions, you should discuss the concepts of what is great tradition, what is little tradition. So this must be discussed. And then how they interact. Their interaction process is studied through universalization and parochialization. And third, where is the place where this whole interaction happens? Sacred complex. So each of these ideas must be discussed in simple detail, and you must redraw the diagram that we drew for sacred complex. That is, draw a diagram showing great traditions, little traditions, how they interact to universalization and parochialization, and what is sacred complex. So in this, first define what is a great tradition, define what is a little tradition. So define them both, and first define or give features. Next, give examples of each. Same way, universalization and parochialization. Learn to define them and then give examples of universalization and parochialization. For universalization, you can give examples of Saurati Saluno festival or Saurati Devi worship that McKim Marriott studied in Kishangadi village. For parochialization, you can talk about Navaratri festival or Lakshmi Puja. These are all examples of how they parochialized into local traditions. And finally, discuss sacred complex and say and conclude. And since we should critically examine, please make sure you also briefly write the criticism of this approach. So this whole approach is very theoretical and it lacks analytical basis, and it is not clear what actually is great, what is actually little, how actually this process happens, and really can we really trace and identify and study the mechanism through which this process happens. All these details and things we don't know. So discuss those issues. Next, impact of Green Revolution on rural society. Here most of you wrote well. I also, wherever there is an issue, it was an easy question. So wherever there is an issue, I pointed out value addition points and I gave suggestions for you to incorporate. So for this, please look at the handout cast 4. Cast 4 on page 3 and page 4, there is a lot of content related to green revolution and social change. The only suggestion I have here, so how do you write this answer? First, define green revolution. Next, define green revolution and discuss its features. Define it and discuss its features. So talk about how here we used high yield variety seeds, HYV seeds, fertilizers, irrigation and mechanized farming, and discuss the regions where green revolution largely happened, that is western states, and it was focused on western states and coastal Andhra and parts of Tamil Nadu. Discuss that and then discuss the impact. Mostly we are talking about positive impact. Discuss the impact. So here start with how it led to food security, that is one. Food security, then it led to increase in rural income. So talk about the economics. And social, then focus on social. So because of green revolution, it benefited middle farmers, middle castes or intermediate castes benefited, and we can also say it led to mechanization and it led to also some kind of women empowerment. And because of this, farmers movements, most of you did not discuss about farmers movements and farmers associations that emerged out of this. It also led to migration, especially rural migration, and it gave thrust to agri industry. And then discuss negatives. Negatives are like rise in inequalities. And one of the major problem of green revolution is the ecological damage. Ecological damage or ecological harm that happened because of green revolution. It led to ecological crisis. So soil salinization, deterioration of soil quality, declining groundwater impacts, and changing, and also discuss issues in cropping pattern. Cropping pattern changed. So soil quality decline, water table decline, all of this, and also gender imbalance. One of the other problems is in these states today we increasingly see declining sex ratio because parents don't want girl child as they may have to part with their land if they have a girl child. So discuss all those points, and in the end, if you look at page 4, I also gave some contributions or some ideas that were suggested by Hanumantrao and World Bank. So Hanumantrao and World Bank report made some observations on green revolution's impact in India, and all those things I discussed in page 4 in the last paragraph. So discuss all of that and finally suggest way forward or reforms. So suggest way forward or suggest reform. So here talk about what MS Swaminathan said. That is, we have to spread green revolution to Eastern India. And not just that, we also need green revolution 2.0, or we need evergreen revolution to make sure the negatives of green revolution are also addressed, and we can make sure we protect our ecology and we protect our native traditional knowledge, all of which have been displaced and lost thanks to the green revolution process. So discuss all those things, and you can also refer to the handout on page 3, cast 4, page 3 to get more content on green revolution. Then we have question 9. Critically evaluate any one anthropological village study. So here generally students have a choice to pick up whichever village study they want. Before that, when I asked you to pick any one anthropological village study, you should write, keep your intro. So the point is, whenever before a question is asked, some of you are writing intros that are very, very you're writing intros which are very, very lengthy and which are very, very long. That's a very bad habit, please. Please don't write intros that are too long and too lengthy. So some of you wrote intros where you talked about what is the importance of Indian village, what is Indian village, different views on Indian village. All of this is an intro. No, your intro must be very brief. Just describe what is Indian village and discuss the importance of village study. That's all. And then directly get into the question where you have to pick any one village study. So whenever you are asked question like this, take some popular village studies. Don't take some unheard of or village studies which don't have much scope. Some wrote D.N. Mazumdar's village study and all that. No. Please don't use those things. Instead, discuss popular village studies. Some popular village studies are, the most popular is by, for example, Andre Bethel, his study of Sripuram, or you can take S.C. Dubey and his study of Shamirpet, or we can discuss M.N. Srinivas and his study of Rampura. These are some famous village studies. Or if you can take McKim Marriott and his study of Kishangadi. Or lastly, you can take Dipankar Gupta's study. This is important because this is the latest village study. So you can choose from any of these different village studies and discuss them. So, and if you are, then whenever you are discussing an approach, you have to discuss what the village study, discuss their approach. For example, Andre Bethel was influenced by Max Weber's approach to the study of society. Dubey and M.N. Srinivas, they were influenced by structural functionalist approach. McKim Marriott is influenced by the civilizational approach of Robert Redfield. So discuss their approach. And I would suggest you pick Andre Bethel. It is quite popular. So you can pick Andre Bethel's village study in Siripuram, and there he makes different observations. For example, in Siripuram village, we find this in his study of caste, class and power. So there in his village of Siripuram, he says earlier the Mirasdars were powerful, but now their position is declining. Why is their position declining? Because one, there is fragmentation of land. So earlier they had huge land parcels, but these huge land parcels have now been broken down because of fragmentation due to inheritance. So if I have 100 acres and I have 5 children, I give them 20 acres each. Now my children, each child has, let's say, 3 children each. Then the 20 acres gets broken down into 6 acres each, and so on. So the land parcels were being fragmented because of subdivision. So large land parcels lost their presence, and because of that in villages, Mirasdars don't have stronghold anymore. Then we also talked about, along with that, another important change is migration. Because of migration to urban areas, earlier the poor had no choice but to listen to Mirasdars in the villages, but now poor don't have to listen to Mirasdars, because if they are too oppressive, they can always leave the village and go to the city to find work. So because of that, Mirasdars' position declined. Along with that, he also notices the rise of intermediate castes because of Panchayat Raj system. Because of Panchayat Raj system, intermediate castes and some aspiring politicians began to gain power through Panchayat Raj, adult franchise, Panchayat Raj system, and democracy. Because of all these practices, because of all these different practices, intermediate castes began to capture power, because in this new political system of elections and Panchayat Raj, to get power, it is not enough to own land or anything. To get power, you need to mobilize people, you need to develop network, followers, you need to be connected to party structures outside the village, you need to have a network of contacts. So, and all of this could be done by some intermediate caste people who aspire to get more power. So, power shifted from Mirasdars and the elites to the intermediate castes. And then, third thing is decline in the position of Brahmins. Decline in the position of Brahmins in the village. And Andre Bethel attributes this to the non-Brahmin movement led by Justice Party in Tamil Nadu or in Madras Presidency initially, and then which spread to other parts of Tamil Nadu. Because of the non-Brahmin movement, Brahmin prestige and Brahmin domination in society began to take a beating. So discuss that case study. And then criticism. Criticism, you can say, why how can you say there are only 3? Second, the study is very old, so its relevance to the present times is questionable. And why it does not study why power did not go to Dalits, and it also does not tell us whether how society is changing under new impacts like liberalization, green revolution, how rural society has been changing under the impacts of green revolution, liberalization, or through systems of minimum support price. So all these different policies, how are they affecting village society? We don't know. And it also fails to capture the role of new caste movement. So discuss those limitations and close it. Or I took Andre Bethel's village study. You can take any such village study and discuss it in holistic way. And the last question is Louis Dumont and his views on caste system. Louis Dumont and his views on caste system. Some students wrote this okay, others also had problem, but on the whole we can improve our content for this, and that is why I shared extensive content on Louis Dumont's perspective on caste in the handout on page 5. So if you look at caste 3 handout on page 5, caste 3 handout on page 5, we have extensive content on Louis Dumont. So if you look at that, primarily discuss some basic facts. Louis Dumont was influenced by, he is a French scholar, so he is influenced by the ideas of Levi-Strauss and Levi-Strauss's approach of structuralism. And his approach is also called Indological approach because of the greater reliance it places, on text. So it's also called as a textual view. It is an Indological approach, or it is also called as textual view. And especially from structuralism, what you must know is he believed in the idea of binary oppositions or binary opposites. And he was also influenced by Bogle. You can see it on the handout. Bogle and his cultural approach to caste. So this is the basic approach. And what are his ideas? So he believes that caste is a system of hierarchy. According to him, caste is a system of hierarchy that is driven by an ideology. And what is the ideology that is driving caste system? There is an ideology of purity and impurity, that is, which are binary opposites. These are two binary opposites. So he says that human mind thinks in terms of two binary oppositions, that is pure and impure. And this binary opposition, to think in terms of purity and impure, is translated into an ideology, and that ideology gets reflected in caste. So purity and impurity, according to him, is the basis of caste. So he says, based on this, different jobs are arranged in a hierarchy based on how much pure they are and how much impure they are. So hierarchy, according to him, is not inequality. He says hierarchy is not about inequality, but hierarchy is mostly about dividing different jobs in a spectrum or in a gradation between pure and impure. So hierarchy is all about dividing different jobs in a spectrum or in a gradation between pure and impure. So because human mind thinks in terms of pure and impure, this purity and impurity gets reflected in a ritual context. This gets reflected in a ritual context, and the ritual context leads us to classify different jobs in a spectrum of pure and impure, and that, according to him, is the basis for caste system. And we find all these ideas in his book Homo Hierarchicus. And the crux of his approach is, he says, different jobs are classified based on their relative purity and impurity, and basically they're arranged in a hierarchy, or they're arranged in an order of their relative purity versus impurity. A job is considered pure, it is placed at the top. A job is considered impure, it is placed at the bottom. That's all. So caste is not about discrimination. Caste is not about exploitation. Caste is just a natural way of expressing what exists in the real world, what exists in nature. That is, in the nature we have pure and impure things, and through caste system we are just putting what is pure at a higher position and putting what is impure at a lower position. That's all. Nothing much about it. So it is not about exploitation as much as it is about differentiating between what is considered to be superior and what is considered to be inferior. And then he says 3 elements are central to the study of caste. To his study of caste. What is that? First, he says division of labor in caste is done on the basis of pure and impure. Next, he says there is superiority of pure over impure. And third, he says that we have to take measures for separation of the two, that is separation of pure and impure. That is what he says. So discuss this, and then of course not everybody agreed with him. There was a lot of criticism against this. So many first, and to justify, before we go to criticism, how does he justify this? He says that to prove his theory, he says, see, if you look at caste system, if you notice caste system, this is the ideology. So according to him, Brahmins have status, high status in this system, while power is with Kshatriyas. So he says, why is it that Kshatriyas, who have most power in society, why are they not placed at the top, and why are Brahmins placed at the top and not Kshatriyas? That is a question he raises. So he says that if you look at the hierarchy, we see that there is status power disjunction. That is, highest status is not given to the people who are considered to be most powerful. These are considered to be the most powerful people. But then highest status is not given to them, but highest status is given to Brahmins. So according to him, status or purity considerations are the most important factors of caste and not considerations of power. Because if power was the driving force behind caste, then Kshatriyas must be at the top and not Brahmins. That is the point he makes. So many others criticized him. For example, Andre Bethel said, this is a very, very book view. It's a bookish view of Indian society and a textual view. So it is telling us what society ought to be. It is not telling us what society actually is. That is the criticism that Andre Bethel leveled. And along with it, others also criticized that there is actually no status power disjunction that he noticed. In fact, he said that Brahmins have highest status is a very, very contentious issue. Because if you look at society, Brahmins may have higher ritual position, but doesn't mean they have higher status. Higher status is with those who have economic and political power. That is where we have dominant caste. So the idea that Brahmins have higher status is also a questionable assumption, and he is ignoring the role of economic and political factors. He is ignoring the role of economic and political factors in caste and is focusing primarily on ritual factors. He is focusing primarily on ritual factors in caste and not on economic and political factors. That is another major problem with his theory, and that is why and it looks like overall he is having a positive view of caste and he is offering some kind of justification to the whole system. He is justifying the caste system. That is why others called him modern Manu, as somebody who is offering a sugar-coated version of caste system, and somebody who is trying to hide the discrimination or hide the injustice that is present in caste. So he was called as modern Manu, and his book Homo Hierarchicus came to be called as modern Manusmriti. So a lot of this content is also there in the handout. Please also read up caste 3, page 5 and 6 in case you fall short of content, right? So with that, we will wind up this session of discussion on AST 8. So with that, we also finished discussion of first section of paper 2. AST 9, for now, I will postpone. We will do it at later date, and in the next meeting, we will have discussions of AST 10 and AST 11 next week. Okay? Until then, take care. All the best.